Welcome to Ultramodern. This is a lifestyle and creative podcast created by Crosswalk Future Of that examines the ways that God is moving and working in today's world. To learn more about Future Of, follow us on Instagram at futureof.cw.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ultramodern Podcast. My name is Andy Palomares. This is the second one that we've ever done. Last week, we just had a conversation with Isai and Josh. We had them on here. That episode was called The Third Wave. It was pretty cool. And thank you for listening to this week's second episode. Shout out to everybody watching on YouTube. Shout out to everybody who cannot see us because you're listening to us on the podcast app or on Spotify. We have the plug. We have a very special guest with us today. He's coming all the way from Loma Linda, California. He is the community pastor at Anthem right now. It is none other than Tommy Tamaleaa. What's up, Tommy?
What's up, Andy? Thank you for having me. Super
bro.
Honored to be a part of something cool that you guys are doing at Crosswalk. So thanks.
Yeah, dude. I'm glad that you're here, bro. So tell us about yourself. Tell us who you are. Tell us your deepest, darkest secrets. Just tell us everything. We want it all.
Oh, I mean, there's not too much to share. I went to Walla Walla University, graduated, lived in Seattle for a little bit, being a pastor out there. Recently moved to SoCal area to work at Anthem and the Loma Linda University Church. And that catches us up.
Yeah, nice. Tell us about Anthem, bro. What is Anthem?
Oh, I love Anthem. Yeah. Anthem is it's a third service added to the university church.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a contemporary service, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun online because we haven't done anything in person yet.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, you guys had one service.
We had one pop-up outside, but we haven't had anything like in the building and with the lights.
Right. And I got on your live service from last week, you guys had the stage that you guys are actually using when you guys go into in-person. And I was blown away, bro. Like, it looked fantastic, like the LED screen behind you guys. And then you guys have that really, like, there's a specific type of stage that is really cool, like the black glossy one. Those ones are super sick, and you guys have that going on, bro.
Man, I wish I could take credit. That would either be Josh, who's the lead of Anthem, or Ronson, who's the production.
Well, shout out Josh and shout out Ronson, dude. So cool, bro. I want to ask you, because you just said you went to Walla Walla. Yeah. And then you moved. I think you worked in Seattle for a bit.
Worked in Seattle for a year.
And then from there you came over to California. Tell us, like, what was that moving like? Because I feel like Walla Walla and Seattle maybe be similar, but then to go from there to SoCal might be a big jump in culture. Like, what was that shift like for you?
Yeah, definitely a shift in culture. But so I've moved most of my life. So the longest I ever lived anywhere growing up was at Walla Walla when I was there for 4 years.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I never lived anywhere longer than 3. So I was always moving as a kid. So I've kind of gotten used to a lot of different cultures. So the shift wasn't too dramatic. But yeah, things are a little different from the PNW to here. Yeah, people love hiking in the PNW, but yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, do you like hiking?
No, I absolutely hate it.
Okay, cool. We're on the same.
Yeah, good.
Same wave. For those of you guys who are listening, we just fist bumped because we're not on that.
Hiking's never been fun for me.
It's not. One time I went to visit some family members out in Arizona.
I used to live in Arizona.
You did used to live in Arizona. Well, I was out there too, and I was with this family, and they said that we were going to go for a hike. And in my mind, because I'm not like a avid hiker, like that's just not part of my lifestyle, I'm like, all right, we're going to go for a walk, and in my head, it was like, we're going to go like a mile and then come back. This turned into like this 5-mile loop where we're just in the middle of the desert, like going around. I'm thinking like this cactus looks the same to this cactus, and it was just I was not prepared. I went in skinny jeans, right, and just not walking shoes. I'm pretty sure.
Were they wearing boots and stuff?
Yeah, everybody was wearing hiking boots.
And the one thing is everyone's like, oh, the views, you get to see great views, but when you're hiking, you're actually looking at your feet so you don't trip on rocks.
Exactly.
So you don't actually see the views or nature. You're just staring at your feet.
Yeah,
you're out of. Yeah,
it's one
fun.
step right in front of the other, so you don't
fun.
fall. It's not. I did when I was younger. I kind of liked. This is not even a hiking podcast, but we're going to talk about hiking for a little bit. Well, I hiked the Grand Canyon, which was a lot of fun.
Okay, that'd be kind of cool. Yeah,
it was cool because I was like 8 or 10 or something.
And you're at the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, with all my cousins, like we all went, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Then I went a couple years later, like a little older. I was probably like 15 or 16. And I was like, it is so dirty. it's hot. Like this water tastes funny, and I'm just not the camping hiker guy.
No,
like,
that's not my thing.
So I'm either a city guy or a suburbs guy. Like that's totally
City. I like the city.
the city guy. Well, that's
Yeah.
cool, bro. Well, I'm glad to have you on here.
Thank you.
So today, what we wanted to talk about is post-election feels, essentially.
Yeah.
The last week when we recorded our podcast, it was recorded before we knew who the president was going to be. So actually, that we recorded the podcast on a Friday, and then Saturday is when President-elect Joe Biden was announced and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was announced.
Yeah.
And our podcast that we had last week was kind of on how to conversate and how to interact with people who have differing views from you. And what we wanted to make a point of is that we can't say one side is right and the other side is wrong. But instead, what we wanted to talk about was how you can have healthy conversations and disagree with people and still be who you are, essentially. And one of the things that we talked about was that in Scripture, Jesus was consistently breaking binary thinking, where one group would think this is the only way, and the other group would think this is the only way. And then Jesus appeared, and consistently he provided a third way. And I think we ended up saying the third wave, because there's a third wave of people that are moving, and there's a new way to do life under Jesus that breaks this binary in life. And
That's
you know,
awesome.
now we're here a week later, and we know who is our president and vice president elect. And what I've been kind of thinking is that for a lot of people, this is a very big moment of relief for some people. And then for other people, this is a moment of defeat. And I can tell you that our community falls across the spectrum. But what I wanted to talk about today is how we can find rest in the midst of this. For some people, this is a moment of anxiety because their president lost and will not be returning. For other people, this is a moment of relief. But also, we're moving into 2021, and the reality is a lot of things that are happening now are going to carry over into 2021.
Yeah.
And what I kind of wanted to do is talk about the Sabbath. How does the Sabbath affect our lives in moments like this? How does the Sabbath bring peace or bring rest in a moment like this? And I think one of the things that I want to do first is just ask you, like, what has your experience been with the Sabbath growing up in the Adventist church? You know, I'm sure you probably had the experience of other people of like, everything is turned off on the Sabbath. This is what the Sabbath is. And, you know, so just talk to us about the Sabbath, bro.
Yeah, the Sabbath, definitely. So I grew up in an Adventist home. I'm sure many people, many people have that are Adventist.
Yeah. There's a lot of us.
Yeah. So I grew up in an Adventist home. So I think growing up, it was definitely like middle of the road. We didn't watch TV on Sabbath. You rested on Sabbath. But we were allowed to like play outside and play with friends. Nice. I was allowed to do that. Like basketball and stuff. That was okay on Sabbath. We could swim on Sabbath. But like I said, no TV, electronics were kind of turned off. I'm trying to think of what else we didn't do. Oh, games, like, you couldn't play Monopoly, so we played like Life of Paul or something. I don't know, Egypt to Canaan, something crazy like that. So yeah, that was Sabbath in terms of what you could and couldn't do. Then I moved to boarding school, which was a lot more restrictive. Like you couldn't bounce a ball on Sabbath, or we had,
Jeez.
No, it was a lot more restrictive in terms of how we did Sabbath there. So that's what we could and couldn't do. But then there's the idea of like, how did it feel? It was very family oriented for Sabbath for us. Kind of spending time with family or friends, because we lived in a neighborhood where we had friends.
Yeah.
But that was kind of Sabbath growing up. I never had anything traumatic like some people. But then there definitely was a moment coming up later in life where my perspective of Sabbath changed. But that was kind of college age.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So would you say that, leading into, I want to hear more about that perspective change.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
What would you say is your overall experience with the Sabbath? And the reason I ask this is because, and you kind of touched on this lightly, some people's experience with Adventism and the Sabbath has been negative.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And for some people, and including myself, actually, the Sabbath was more of this day of legalistic behavior as opposed to finding true rest in Jesus or in communion with God. And I want to, like, what was your experience with that? Was it a positive experience? Was it somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm trying to be like realistic in it. I didn't have a bad experience like a lot of people have, and I don't want to say I did because I don't want to diminish how bad their experience was, and I don't want to piggyback off like, oh yeah, my life was terrible.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I had good experiences, but I wouldn't say like I loved Sabbath. Like it was kind of a bummer that I couldn't do things I wanted to do. So that part sucked. So I definitely say middle of the road. It felt restrictive, in a sense, but I think the Sabbath, and we'll talk about this in a bit, I'm sure, but the Sabbath is, I think Adventism as a whole has really missed the mark on the Sabbath. Because I think the Sabbath, if we were to dive into it, theologically and biblically, what are the repercussions of it? I think it's probably one of the most gospel-oriented and most beautiful aspects of Scripture. You'll find it on almost every single page. And I think Adventism has distorted it in a very sad way.
Wow.
But we can dive into that more. I want to hear your perspective of Sabbath first.
Sure. We'll hear my perspective, but then as soon as that's done, I want to hear what you have to say about that. Do that. Got some hot takes on here, bro. But so my experience with the Sabbath, I think mine was similar to yours, where it was very family-oriented days where we would hang out after church. We'd go to like one of my cousin's house, and but the thing is, I mean, all my cousins loved playing video games. Like video games was one of the things we loved. Yeah. But there was no video game playing until like nighttime. So like during the day we'd go out and my grandparents had a house out in Lake Matthews, which is outside of Riverside basically. Okay. And they just had tons of property, and we would just go out there and just, I don't know, chase each other in the dirt, and we would find lizards and find snakes, and which was so sketchy because we were like 8 or 9 years old. Like, do you like snakes? I hate snakes.
Oh, okay. But
then as a kid, I was like, wow. We would hear the rattle, like from the rattlesnake, and we would go and try to find the snake. And sometimes we'd find it, sometimes we wouldn't. And it was a fun time. But I think as I grew older, especially I jumped churches, and sometimes when you hop churches, you actually find different views of the Sabbath. So I would sometimes go to the Spanish church, where it was like, if you do anything on the Sabbath that like watch TV, play video games, if you listen to secular music on the Sabbath, it is like game over. Like you have angered God, essentially.
You've broken the covenantal.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then in other churches I've been to, I was part of this youth group one time that decided to begin playing secular music on the Sabbath, like during the worship service, which was huge. Mind-blowing at the time.
That's a big shift.
It was a huge shift, And I had this like pretty across the board or big spectrum experience with the Sabbath, but the taste in my mouth that was left was kind of like, if I do something wrong on the Sabbath, then God is angry with me. And for me, I think my view of the Sabbath was a little distorted, because I would focus more on what I could and couldn't do as opposed to actually finding rest in Jesus or finding rest with God. And I think now today, maybe some people have been scarred in that sense from the church, from this maybe legalistic mindset, and now have left the church and are now wanting to return. And I think right now through Ultramodern, I want to provide a space for them to find rest, to find real meaning in the Sabbath, as opposed to what they had experienced in the past, But dude, totally. Tell us about your shift, bro, in thinking about the Sabbath.
Okay, well, interrupt at any point if it's getting boring, because I feel like theology can be kind of boring sometimes.
Theology is fun, everybody. Theology is fun.
Yeah, it is, but it's, I mean, I think it is, but I'm sure many people will be like, yeah, it's
just not. So you know, Darren looked at me right now. Darren's our producer. He's over here. Darren just like looked at me and was like rolled his eyes when I said theology is fun. Anyways.
It's okay, Darren.
Go ahead.
So, well, I think we have to approach it like, how has Adventism traditionally approached Sabbath? And I think... okay, maybe I should be careful, is because I'm not really sure what's on the fundamental beliefs. I don't know those by heart.
Yeah,
but
that's fine. No one does.
the Sabbath as it's presented through mainstream Adventism, right, is that there is a day that God has set aside in the Ten Commandments that is the day we should observe to rest. And if we choose a different day to hold that rest, then we're going against what God has asked us. And then through prophetic voice or through sermons that we've had, we've also turned it into when it comes towards the end of ages and the end of Revelation, God's about to come back. There's going to be this moment where Sabbath is the mark of his people. And if you don't keep the Sabbath or you choose a different day, then you are not a part of God's remnant group. And that's how we present Sabbath. Now, whether that's the official Adventist belief, I don't actually know. But that's the mainstream Adventist.
That's how it was presented to you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but I don't think it's just me. I think it's Adventism as a whole.
Yeah, that's how I experienced it too. Definitely as like a marker. And
yeah, we talk about, there's the mark of the beast, and then God has a mark of his people, and it's, do they keep the Sabbath? Right. And so with that being presented, there's a lot of problems that come with it, because one, it's binary, as you guys talked about last week. It's us versus them, and it's not this collective idea that Scripture presents itself. It's me and then everyone else, and are you with me or are you against me?
In-group and out-group.
Yeah, which is the kind of the opposite of what Jesus did. Jesus was so much more inclusive. But more than that, we miss what the Sabbath is actually talking about.
Right.
And so when I look at it from the Ten Commandments, we often talk about the Sabbath is unchanging, the Ten Commandments can never change, right? We talk about that. But if you look at the Ten Commandments, you'll see that it shows up twice in the Bible. Once in Exodus, and then there's a retelling of the story in Deuteronomy. And so the story of the Ten Commandments in Exodus, you'll see that when they were given the Ten Commandments, it was listed why you should keep the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, blah, 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 blah. And the reason they're told to keep the Sabbath in Exodus is because for you were once slaves and now you are not slaves. But if you look at the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy, it changes the language. And it actually doesn't say that they should keep the Sabbath because of they were slaves. It says because they were, it's a remembrance of creation. And so there's a shift in when Moses retells the Ten Commandments on how and why they should keep the Sabbath. Right. So what changes is that's important for us is that to know that it wasn't set in stone, that it was able to change and breathe according to the culture and according to the time.
Yeah.
And so what was true in Exodus was no longer true in Deuteronomy.
Right.
And so probably what's true in the Old Testament has shifted and changed. Principles stay the same, but how it's applied and why it's applied changes for us today.
That's incredible, bro.
Yeah.
Dude, and what a, like, that just is opening the door to a new realm of thinking, right? Because we're now sitting in 2020 and in the midst of COVID, racial tension, an election year, all of this, Sabbath probably not only can't remain what it has been, but it shouldn't remain what it has been. It has to be something that is breathing something new. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that shift. And I love that what you pointed out. I've never saw it that way. In Exodus, it's once you were slaves, now you are free. Then now in Deuteronomy, it's a remembrance of creation. And it's this changing of the idea. What would you say right now is a necessary shift for the Sabbath from what it was maybe in our upbringing or maybe in the history of Adventism and now what it can be today?
So I'm going to speak off the cuff. I'm maybe like Tim Mackey or John Mark Comer. They, have written beautiful works on the Sabbath. Might disagree, but if we look at the Sabbath in Exodus, right? There's, and it reflects. I think it relates to today. So I'll join them in a second. Yeah. If you look at the Sabbath in the Exodus in Exodus, it talks about. It names like you shouldn't do any work, your wife shouldn't do any work, your kids shouldn't do any work, your slave shouldn't do any work, your oxen shouldn't do any work. And it lists all of these things that shouldn't do any work on the Sabbath. But what's really interesting is the fact that it names those people. So right away, what do we see that the Sabbath automatically elevates children. It automatically elevates women to the same status as the man. Wow. So the first thing that you see that the Sabbath does, it creates an equal opportunity for everybody.
I see.
But what's more important is that it names your slaves. So think practically for a second. If you had slaves, right? We're back in Bible times. You had slaves, and you're told by God Himself that you have to treat your slaves have to have the same amount of rest that you get as someone who owns them, and that means they're supposed to join in this idea of communion with God and communion with each other.
Right.
So if your slaves get that same access that you do to God, it would be really difficult, at least I think, it would be really difficult to treat your slaves poorly through the rest of the week. And then somehow when we get to Sabbath, you treating them as equals. So what does the Sabbath automatically do? The Sabbath automatically reframes your thinking of, I have to treat the people who are lesser than in society as if they're equal.
Wow.
On Sabbath. So that's going to translate how I treat them the whole week.
The whole week, yeah.
So 2020, we have so much racial tension because there's been a group that's been completely disbarred and has marginalized their entire existence. The Sabbath speaks to that in saying all people are created equal, and you actually have to give equal opportunity to all people. Right. And so it should change if we're observing the Sabbath correctly. It should change how we interact with culture through the rest of our lives.
That's incredible, bro. And the first thing that I think about is if we're going to take something like that and actually believe it and apply it to our life, that Sabbath as this incentive to reach all people, to create equal opportunities, to create equity, then when it comes to social issues, the church should be at probably the forefront of these things, as opposed to the last in line. And I think that was something growing up. I never saw church in politics as much as until now, and that might have just been my perspective. I also didn't care about anything growing up. Like, I was just so disconnected from what was going on in the world. But something that I've seen distinctly happen this year is churches and church leaders begin to speak out and speak up for things like Black Lives Matter, for people that have experienced racial injustice. And now we're talking about the Sabbath, it kind of ceases just to be a day. Sabbath seems to become this lifestyle. So like, if you're going to claim Sabbath as your day of rest and this lifestyle that comes with Sabbath, then it actually means that the way that you live your life, the way you treat people, the way that you go about living your life actually is different. That you choose to create equity for people. You choose to stand up for the people that are hurting, which is interesting because I saw a lot of churches speak up during, let's say, like at the start of Black Lives Matter this year.
It was at June,
I think it was
March?
May or June, yeah.
May is better, yeah.
And I also saw a lot of leaders in our church, not our specific church here, our denomination, the greater church. I saw a lot of leaders stay silent. And it's an interesting thing. And I saw this big shift where for a long time, what I would preach from the pulpit and what I would speak on was a lot of messages on how to align people's personal theologies, how to keep people connected to God personally. And, I mean, that was the thing. I love that. I would look at a bunch of big name pastors and they would have these awesome messages on grace, and all they would talk about is grace, and which is an amazing message. That at the end of the day, that is what Jesus spoke. Right. It's grace. But I found myself being so good at like getting people to a point where they can accept Jesus in their life for themselves, that when Black Lives Matter began this year, and it's been a movement for a long time, but the heat of it this year, I was stopped in my tracks, bro, because I realized it would be insensitive. I wouldn't be reading the room right if I were in the heat of that to give a message on how you can align your own personal theology with Jesus, And what I've found is that in the church actually has to be one of those moving forces to bring everybody together. Like, this is for everyone. Yeah. And, I think, speaking of Sabbath, the Sabbath should be the incentive for our church, the greater church, to continue pushing out and making moves for people. Yeah. And maybe you can tell us a little bit, because I know you were in Seattle. Yeah. Until what, June, July?
August, yeah.
August? Okay. And you were there for a lot of...
I saw it all.
Tell us about it. And maybe you can even... I mean, you don't have to tell us everything, because I'm sure you told me one time that you saw something pretty crazy. You can tell us about that if you want. But yeah, I'm trying to... But also, like, how because you're in the thick of that. I was at a protest,
Uh-huh.
and it was a beautiful experience to see people standing up and trying to raise their voice. They brought me to tears. I saw people crying, and it was a place where I really felt that God was moving.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us about your experience, bro, and maybe how maybe you could relate that to the Sabbath, and how Sabbath maybe is an incentive to speak up.
Yeah. I think you nailed it down well, that the Sabbath as a day, we miss so much if we don't make it bigger than a day. Because in the Bible, it is bigger than a day.
Yeah.
You see right at the commandment, you have to treat your slaves the same. So that changes, okay, then throughout the week, I have to treat them well. So that changes, like, okay, throughout the rest of life, I have to treat them well.
Yeah.
And it's also, the idea of 7. It's represented, the 7 gets bigger, and so we hear the year of Jubilee. So it just becomes this bigger thing. It was never about a day. It was always about a lifestyle.
Right.
And so that should be the mark of God's people, is the lifestyle. Now, in Seattle, No, so I went down to like a few of the first protests because this is something, it's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I was there, and I'll be honest, there were some of the protests that I've been to that were just beautiful. But this one, it was beautiful in that so many people cared, but it was also so hurtful because people were angry. And rightfully so. They should be angry.
Yeah.
And so what was saddened is that there was so many people that I was with. I mean, there was tons of people there, and they were angry, and it felt like their voices weren't being heard.
Right.
And so in that sense, it was beautiful that we all came together and we said, we're going to try to speak to this issue. But it was hurtful that no one was listening. Don't get me wrong, a few laws got passed, and I follow a few pages still on Instagram and talk to some of them, and things that didn't get passed. But yeah, I saw I was there, and I was tear gassed, and the whole thing that you see, tear gassed, and the pepper sprayed in the face. I watched people like burn cars. I saw people spray paint buildings, break windows. Guns were getting pulled out. I saw it all. And all of that anger. Some people can say like, man, it's wrong that you're destroying buildings and people's businesses. But that sort of anger and the need to be heard, that is a result of not being heard. And so what do you expect when so many people have been marginalized, and if we're going to relate it back to the Sabbath, haven't been keeping the Sabbath, not as a day, but as a lifestyle.
Right, yeah.
What do you expect?
Exactly. So you're talking about how you were in some pretty intense situations there in Seattle.
Yeah.
And it was across the country too, a lot of rioting, a lot of anger. And one of the people that I spoke to in the heat of Black Lives Matter and all that, in those couple months, I got a lot of, I was on Instagram and I was saying certain things, and other people were saying things, and at some points it was very unhealthy to be on social media, because social media became like a very woke, I'm just gonna talk over
all
you
or nothing.
All or nothing. But there were some brief moments where I found really good conversation, and I had this conversation with this one person that was just very, very sure that Jesus would not be marching, and that Jesus wasn't present in times like that.
Interesting.
I thought it was very interesting. I disagreed with the person, and I disagreed because of this song. I don't know if you've heard of Prince of Peace by Hillsong United.
Yeah.
And the chorus of it actually goes something like, when night screams terror, you'll hear my cry. When something along those lines. And what I immediately thought of was a couple years ago. Do you remember the attack that happened in Paris? There was when that happened, the writers of the song, like Joel Houston and them, posted about it. And one of the things that they did was post the lyrics of the song, kind of explaining that even in the darkest of moments in human history, or in the moments where people feel the most hurt, that is where God is actually moving the most, and that's where God is the most present. And I understood what he was saying. This person that was saying that Jesus wouldn't be there, but what I'm very firm in believing is that Jesus is in those moments. Jesus, not only where hurt is being experienced and maybe sometimes terror is being experienced, but Jesus exists with the marginalized, with the people that are hurting. And I think when we look at Jesus, we're seeing the epitome of a Sabbath lifestyle, and consistently over and over, Jesus breaks the box that the Jewish people had put God in. And you look at it into the culture, Samaritan people, you don't interact with them, you don't talk to
Right.
them. Jesus breaks the box, gives us the parable of the Good Samaritan. People who have leprosy are absolutely unclean, and this is a culture where if you touch certain things or you eat certain things or you talk to certain people, you are now unclean. You have to go through a ritual to become cleansed again. Jesus steps out and begins to heal people with leprosy, stand in spaces. And I even think about the woman caught in adultery, which is such an interesting story, because for there to be a woman caught in adultery means that there was a man caught in adultery as well.
Yeah.
And Scripture never talks about that.
We don't know the man.
We don't know the man, but we do know the woman, and we do know that she was going to be stoned to death. And Jesus enters a situation like that, and again breaks the box and advocates on her behalf and saves her. And, we think now back to 2020 and everything that we've experienced, a Sabbath lifestyle always has to lead us to other people.
Yeah, it's communal by nature.
Exactly. It is a community forming. It is something that unifies us and brings us together. And I think in talks of where we can go from here, I think we have to make it a point to have Sabbath at the forefront, this lifestyle of bringing unity, which is very much different from what I had growing up. Like when I was growing up, it wasn't this unifying thing per se. I mean, besides my family, it was more you sit there and you feel connected to God, which is important. Like our personal theology is so important. Our personal connection to God is so important. But now, in the midst of everything that we've experienced, what I'm recognizing is Sabbath cannot just be that. Sabbath has to be this communal experience.
Yeah. By nature. And I want to speak to that point of Jesus wouldn't be marching. Jesus wasn't going to be there. And this may not be our total focus, but what's interesting is that when you look at the temple in Jerusalem, right? Fast forwarding to Jesus' day, so AD 30 something. We're there. We're looking at the temple, and we see that there's this disparity that's happening inside the temple. And what you have is the outer courts got turned into the spot where you can buy sheep, where you could transfer your money to the temple currency, and then you could buy sheep and be able to sacrifice them. Now, that's permitted to be done inside of, I'm forgetting the name of the book. The laws that the Jewish rabbis created to protect the Torah. I'm forgetting the name of the book. But that was permitted to be done as long as it was in the outer courts. That was allowed to be done. So that wasn't the anger that was there. But Jesus shows up and he sees what's happening. But what's interesting is the Gentiles, so non-Jewish people, were only allowed to be inside of the outer courts. That was the only place they could go in. So if they were God-fearers, like the Bible calls them, or people who respected Jewish laws and came to sacrifice and all that, they couldn't go on the inside. That was reserved only for Jewish people. So what we see with Jesus, then he shows up and he gets really, really upset. And he calls it a den of thieves. And so when I was reading and studying it, I believe that Jesus was upset because they turned the only place that Gentiles could come to worship God, the most holy place, they turned that into a marketplace and robbed them of a sacred experience. And so we see Jesus gets angry at this obvious racial disparity that's happening, so racism. We see that he gets angry, and what does Jesus do? He chases out animals. He destroys a few businesses. He flips over the tables. Jesus naturally riots for the sake of racism.
Wow. Yeah.
So I got a lot of pushback whenever I say this, and you probably cut it out if you need to. But I see Jesus on the side of, and this is kind of the whole idea of Sabbath, Jesus is on the side of those in pain.
Right.
And I think pain naturally leads to destruction. And so that is a natural result of pain.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, first of all, thanks for saying that. And this is a safe space to say stuff like that. And it is a hot take, but it's also something that, like, we don't need cookie cutter answers right now. We need people to be pretty radical and out there about their faith. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you saying that. And, one of the things that I think about is the girl that Jesus heals. She has was it a girl or boy? She has a demon, and then she keeps throwing herself in the fire.
You're testing my Bible knowledge.
I know, I'm forgetting. To the child.
That story exists.
Yeah.
I think it might be a girl, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm going to say the child for now. Sorry for anybody who
Yeah,
is
child.
judging
Child.
these two pastors. Well, the child is possessed with a demon, and the child continues to throw itself into the fire and cause self-harm. And Jesus approaches this child and heals the child, and as a result, the child is able to function and live a normal life, free from self-harm.
Okay.
And this is off the cuff, but I wonder how many of our people in our nation have been plagued with certain hurts or certain things or certain systems that have hurt them, and what Jesus is actively trying to do is change those systems so that the people can thrive and continue to live a life that is blessed, that is good, that is something that is going to bring them up, And oh man, what was I going to say? Dang it.
No, you're right. We're talking about changing the system,
Yeah.
and that's the Sabbath idea.
Yeah.
That's the Sabbath idea. Yeah, that Jesus shows up, and even it's in Exodus, it's in Deuteronomy. Like the idea of Sabbath showing up, and it automatically changes the way we live, and it's bigger than a day. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so I think anyone who's felt like, man, this idea of Sabbath, it's been oppressive in the nature of like, I can't do this, can't do that. That was never the intent of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was the idea of rest and equal opportunity, equal access to the table. That's what the Sabbath was about then. And I think that's the most predominant aspect that we could add to our lives now. And I'm sure in Western America, we could talk about, the idea of taking a break, of doing something other than work. I think that's important.
Yeah.
And that is part of the Sabbath. Ideal.
Well, let's go that direction. Well, let me conclude that portion of
go ahead.
Sabbath needs to be something that brings us together. Like all people, doesn't matter economic status or beliefs or anything. Sabbath is this unifying thing. And right now, I think maybe would be nice is to lean into that personal aspect now of how the Sabbath is affects us today. Because what you're saying is so right that there is a personal aspect to the Sabbath, finding unity with God that is very beautiful. And in my experience, that took the back seat to a lot of things, that instead of focusing on the unification aspect of me and Jesus being in communion, in relationship, instead it was like, don't do this, don't do that. God is mad at you if you do that. And, right now, I want to talk about maybe the nuances of Sabbath that are happening, because like we kind of started with this question and we didn't really totally answer it, but the idea that they're probably, well, not to limit two sides, but there are people that are excited about next year and there are people that are now angry. How can Sabbath,
and all the in between,
exactly, and everything in between, maybe not teach people what to think, but maybe how can we give the Sabbath to them as this beautiful tool so that they can find peace in their own life regarding whatever they believe or whatever side of the spectrum. So how would you use the tool Sabbath as a tool for somebody? How would you show them how to use it so that they could find that peace with Jesus during a time like this?
Yeah, I'm sure you have a better answer than I would. But
I do not.
Well, I have found blessings in the idea of I will take a set amount of time and I will make sure to rest on that. But rest looks different for everybody. So it can't be like, just go take a nap. That's not restful for some people. Some people want to go hike. Some people want to sit down and watch a movie. Some people want to, kick it with the boys. Saturdays are for the boys. It's even in the modern culture.
There it is.
Yeah, it's there. So that idea of taking time and it being a weekly thing is something that I've adopted in my life. One, I was raised with it, but two, it's become meaningful to like, no, today I'm just gonna kick it. And it just so happens that there's like a bunch of church going on at the same time, and I like worshiping, so I'm gonna use that time and space to connect with people and connect with God. I think that's beneficial.
I was gonna say, I think you're super right on connecting. Like you said, Saturdays are for the boys, right? It's so funny, but I think that culture has this idea of Sabbath built into it, but culture just hasn't labeled it as Sabbath. So what I mean is, if you read like any self-help book right now, or if you read anything along those lines, chances are there's going to be a chapter on the power of no, and not taking on what you cannot handle, which was a very hard thing for me to do in my life, to say no to something. And the idea behind saying no is that there is a limit to what you can handle sometimes. And oftentimes what we do is we overload ourselves with things that not necessarily that we don't want to do, but that maybe we don't have the capacity to do at that moment. And it leads to really big burnout, or it leads to moments where we're feeling low. And really the Sabbath is that. Sabbath is the biggest no, but in a good sense, not like it's like a good no.
So we started this off with, our whole lives now Sabbath has been no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, and then Andy just said Sabbath is the biggest no.
Sabbath is the biggest no.
But a good no.
Yeah, Sabbath is your opportunity to take a break from what you're doing.
Yeah,
like Sabbath is the most healthy way.
And we're not talking about Sabbath as a lifestyle. We're talking about Sabbath, well, even lifestyle
or day.
We're talking about there is a day that you can take a break.
Exactly, where you can turn everything off and that's the hardest thing for me. And tell me if you relate to this. If not, it's okay. But for me, it is a hard time for me to step away from work sometimes, and to stop building what I enjoy building. It sometimes is very hard for me to. And Netflix is a healing thing. Thank you for Netflix. God, like Netflix is amazing. At times, Netflix is one of the most addicting things like. Yeah,
there are some people that should be their no.
Yeah, that should be your no.
Sometimes that's me.
A lot of the times that's me.
Yeah.
But Sabbath is this opportunity for you to say no to the things that are taking from you, and say yes to the things that are feeding you. And maybe can you share some wisdom on what that nuance looks like? So because growing up, it was a no to anything secular. It was a no to anything you watch. What does a yes look like in this nuanced view of Sabbath?
It's funny. I remember one of my brothers had watched a movie on Sabbath. I know.
Morocco? Was that Morocco?
Yeah, it was actually.
Morocco, bro. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, bro.
Love you, bro.
I'm airing out his laundry. Oh, well, we'll get over it. He had watched a movie on Sabbath, and my mom had found out he had watched a movie on Sabbath. And then I think maybe the next morning he woke up to a text, and it was like this Bible verse on, if you break the Sabbath, God's holy day, the punishment, you shall be put to death. I was like, oh my God. I was like, Mom, what in the world?
He has to learn.
I know, yeah. So it's hard for me to answer because my mom's watching this, but sometimes you need to say yes to a movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know where we got this idea that how we've created a separation between the secular and the sanctified, or the secular and the holy.
Yeah. Because
you find that Jesus never created that dichotomy. So I don't know where that came. Probably it was Augustine who said like, this is this and this is evil. But that was really never Jesus's thing.
Yeah.
And so for us, I don't. The creativity I find in Hillsong, or creativity I find in Crosswalk worship, is the same creativity I find in Lanning, or the same creativity that I find in Oh Wonder, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
They are no less sacred, and they're no less secular. They are the same.
Dude, you're so right. And
so I don't. No. I'm just saying I don't create a distinction. So if you need to say yes to a movie, you need to say yes to getting your nails done, or getting a pedicure, or Warzone with the boys, whatever it is. You need to say yes to that, because that is a mental break, and I do not create that distinction between the sacred and the secular.
Yeah, no, that is great. And you brought up so many things in my mind. Different personalities rest differently. So, for example, I am an
Enneagram.
Introvert. Oh, Enneagram 9.
I thought you were going to throw out the numbers.
No, we could do Enneagram too. I'm an Enneagram 9. I enjoy my alone time. I enjoy being by myself. And one of the things that actually takes a lot out of me is being in big social settings, which COVID, interestingly enough, has done wonders for me because I can be alone more often. But, in the way that I rest is going to be different than the way someone else rests. The way that I rest really requires me to be alone and away from people. And another thing that I'm realizing is that different personalities need specifically different types of rest. So for some people, it is like I need to disconnect from everything because I am literally, it just takes and takes from me. And for those people, maybe turning all electronics off on the Sabbath is positive. For other people, I am literally doing paperwork all day. I am doing schoolwork all day.
Right.
And I never have time responsibly to watch Netflix or to play Warzone, you know? For those people, Sabbath is an opportunity for them to get in touch with that part of themselves, to find rest in that, you know? So maybe you could tell us a little bit, what is your rest style? Because the people want to know.
I don't think he actually wants to, but I am a large extrovert, like very, very extroverted. And as a pastor, and not so much now, but definitely when I was in Seattle, I did a lot of speaking at church.
Right.
And so I was always, locked away in my office, got to set aside 5 hours today and just write and get all of that creative process. And that was so draining. I loved it because I love speaking, but yeah, I don't know what it is. You get a microphone in front of me, I'm happy. Like I like people having to listen to me.
Yeah.
I loved it, but it was draining. Right. And so what I found, like, this being locked away and trying to do this creative process. So journaling, I can't do that stuff. It's too much. It's too draining. So what I find is a release is actually last week, Saturday evening, I went over to a friend's house in LA, and there were a few people there, and it was like this, like, oh man, that was really nice. Like,
yeah.
I feel good. Like I remember getting up for work in the morning on Monday, and I was like, oh man, I had a really good restful weekend. Yeah, I spent it with friends. We were laughing. I love laughing. That's my favorite thing.
Dude, what a rare moment to like Monday morning. You're like, that was a good weekend. Because oftentimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's another week, dude.
Especially if you're a pastor and you're an introvert, church can be very draining.
Oh yeah, dude. As the pastor, that is an introvert pastor.
Oh yeah.
I love being with people. I cannot do it longer than a couple hours. Like it drains me, man.
And you guys have multiple services here, so that's got to be really tough.
Well, it's tough pre-COVID. Right now, it's kind of like the sweet spot but then again, I hang out every week. Like every Tuesday night, we have our Future of gathering. Every Friday night, we have a Vespers. And then now we're stepping into every Saturday night, we have an event for our high schoolers. So it's just consistent. Like I'm around people all the time. And mind you, everybody that's listening that comes to our events, I love you. I love hanging out with you. But also my soul needs to be alone sometimes. And if that's you, if you're the introvert that's consistently around people, take some time to be alone. Yeah. Watch Netflix. Tell your boss that your pastor Andy said so.
Yeah.
Pastor.
Or if you're the extrovert, go hang out with some people. I know during COVID we have to be a lot more careful, which you should. Numbers are going up, and I believe that. But before we all got together, we actually all got tested. So I probably should put that as a disclaimer. Yeah. All of us were tested before we showed up, because we were really intent on hanging out that weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, go find some people and
there's safe ways to do it. Like the idea that you cannot see anybody is like maybe over exaggerated. Like there's a safe ways to hang out with people, and if you're extroverted, go hang out with people. Maybe it's me if you catch me on a good day. No, I'm just kidding. I will end on this idea, bro, because you mentioned something really cool. You said that the same creativity that Crosswalk Worship uses or Anthem uses is the same creativity that bands like Oh Wonder or Laney use, you know? And the idea that I consistently come back to is that we as Christians have often placed a box as bounds for where God can be. Like this is where God exists, when in reality there's an entire spectrum of life that is happening. And while we should live certain ways and we should do certain things and should not do certain things, like, yeah, we can say that. But at the same time, what I'm finding is that God does not just exist here in this box, but God is everywhere. And maybe part of the Sabbath lifestyle is to go out and find God. Go out and see where God may be outside of this box.
Wonderful.
Because you read scripture, what we find is that Jesus is often outside of the box that people had set him. Jesus is consistently outside in places where we didn't know he was going to be. So if you are currently looking for a Sabbath lifestyle, maybe it's time to look in new places.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, you want to leave us with any hope, any encouragement, anything? Or
When you were on the Anthem podcast, I think you had made a statement that stuck with me, is that we had talked about how God is love. And if God is love, and love is everywhere, and people who don't claim to be a part of God experience love, that means even the godless are God-filled.
my guy, you said that.
No, I think you said that.
No, that was either you or Josh. But
Well, you told a story that
I told the story after that.
yeah,
I
okay,
feel
that
you.
was the part. But that God is even a part of what we would say God is not a part of,
Yeah.
because love is there.
Yes.
So that's the Sabbath idea.
That's great. Go find love.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Love.
bro, thank you for being here. I love you, bro. Tell us, this is your time for a plug. Yeah. First We Feast, you know, the Hot Ones show. They do this where like they give them a plug. Like, this is what we're up to.
Oh.
Tell us, bro, what are you up to in life? Like, give us something to look forward to in life for you.
Yeah. Well, I think part of crosswalk culture, part of anthem culture is that we're always, if we're not the spot where you can find that community that's God-filled, we want to make sure you have other outlets. So if you're listening from this and you're part of the Anthem community, and this is not, our community is not necessarily where you can find love and that kind of belonging, we know crosswalk just might be. And I think the same can be said.
Let me say that for you. If you're listening and you are interested in Anthem and you're looking for a place where your soul can be taken care of, go to Anthem.
Go to crosswalk.
Go to Anthem. There it is.
Yeah, there's the plug.
Awesome. Hey, love you, man. Thank you so
thank
much.
you for having me.
Yeah, see you guys all later. Catch you guys next time.